Hello and welcome back to both my subscribers. Today's video is going to be completely different, as you may have seen from the thumbnail or the description. If you don't care about non-WoW related content, shame on you, you heartless bastard. No, I'm just kidding. Feel free to X out after you like, comment, and subscribe. Kidding again. It's been a pretty stressful few days, and humor is just one way to deal. So, for those of you who don't know, I live in Alaska. I actually live very close to the epicenter of the 7.0 earthquake that hit on Friday. I know there's a lot of people out there who don't really know a lot about Alaska, and some of you mouth breather Americans might not even know that Alaska is part of the United States. Well, it is. Earthquakes are not a new thing to Alaska. We have earthquakes all the time. I don't even wake up for anything less than a 4.0 unless, of course, it's an aftershock following a 7.0, in which case I don't sleep for 24 hours. That being said, this time it was pretty different. At 8:29 a.m. Alaska Standard Time, that's 9:29 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, or 12:29 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and the rest of you can do the math to figure out what time it was in your time zone. But anyway, that's when a 7.0 earthquake happened. I was in my office, and I can't even remember exactly what I was doing at that very moment, but I can tell you when the shaking started, I thought it was just a little quake. Then it started to shake harder and harder. For those of you who haven't been through an earthquake before, they're usually not very long in duration. Most of the time, they last maybe 10 seconds. A small earthquake might not even really register you, depending on how far away you are from it. I've been through an earthquake where I was sitting in my chair playing WoW, and I thought one of my kids snuck up behind me and was trying to get my attention by shaking my chair a little. That one turned out to be a 4.2. I've been here for a couple that were in the 5 to 6 range. One of the bigger ones knocked some stuff off the walls and was pretty scary, but it was over pretty quickly. That one happened like at 1 a.m. on a Saturday, and I was just about to go to sleep. I got to experience a pretty significant 6.3 earthquake while I was at work. That one was terrifying because I hadn't been in Alaska long, and I work on the third floor of a 50-plus-year-old building. The whole building swayed, and I thought I was going to collapse. Luckily, it held. Nothing really fell down. There wasn't a whole lot of damage. But back to the earthquake in question. So the shaking started off relatively mild, but got stronger and stronger. The quake also lasted a pretty significant amount of time. I want to say it was between 30 and 45 seconds, but it felt like much longer. I started to get pretty scared when stuff began flying off the shelves, and I started to wonder if I was going to survive when all the power went out. Luckily, it did stop, and the building didn't collapse, and I was alive. I grabbed my coat, my phone, and got out of the building. As soon as I got to the parking lot, another one hit. This one, it was only a 5.7. I say only because the first one was a 7.0. Of course, I didn't find this out until after the fact, but it was, it felt pretty significant because in addition to being a 5.7, it was 10 miles closer to where I was at the time. Right after that, I tried calling every member of my family, but the calls just wouldn't go through, and that was the really scary part. Not knowing about the safety of my family was the scariest by far part of the entire experience. I drove about 10 miles home across what turned out to be a damaged bridge that's right now is closed to traffic, and I made it home. My house was in shambles, but everyone was alive. There was a really bad smell coming from the house, and my first concern was that it was a gas leak. I got everyone out, including our two small dogs, but two of our three cats were missing. And the one cat we were able to get out of the house was so scared, he was literally pissing himself. After I got everyone secured in my truck and I went back in and was assessing the situation, smell from the house wasn't a gas leak that I could tell. It didn't quite smell like gas, but it smelled like something that was just not right. Well, it turns out to be a combination of cheap and expensive liquors that mixed together when their bottles were thrown from our china cabinet and smashed to the floor. In addition to several other things that were smashed to the floor. So there's glass everywhere. Places is just in really bad shape. For a while, we just focused on getting things cleaned up, but it was very hard with all the aftershocks that just kept rolling in. Eventually, we were able to find another one of the cats. It was probably about maybe 2 or 3 hours after the initial earthquake, but the other cat remained missing. We looked everywhere, up and down the house. We couldn't find him. We were really sure that he couldn't have gotten out of the house, but he wasn't responding when we would call him. Um, The power came back on about 4.5 hours or so after the initial quake. And when it came back on, we intensified our search for the missing cat, while we were also trying to clean up stuff as well. It wasn't until about 2 or 3 more hours after that that we found him. Apparently, when the shaking started, he jumped behind a very large and very heavy dresser that was against a wall. During the quake, the dresser got pushed back against the wall where it looked like there was not enough room for him to be. You can look on the screen. Here's a picture of my cat. His name's Sullivan. We call him Sully, like from Monsters Inc. As you can tell, Sully's a Maine Coon, and he's an enormous cat. He weighs about 18 pounds. Somehow he was stuck in a position not big enough for him to fit. When I found him, I had to send the kids out of the room because I was prepared for the worst. He was smushed up against the wall for hours, and he hadn't even let out a whimper. After I moved the dresser and was able to get him out, he was pretty shook up, but he seemed to be okay. It took a good part of the rest of the day to get him to eat and drink. He was just so traumatized. He was just terrified, and his initial reaction was to go run and hide again. But yeah, once our last pet was accounted for, I felt like maybe I could rest a little bit easier, but that was absolutely not the case. No one in the house was able to sleep for more than 30 to 45 minutes at a time for the whole night because that's how much time was between each aftershock. And these aftershocks ranged from about 3.0 to about 5.2. And every time there was an aftershock, we all had the fear that another big one was going to hit. And this continued until about 9 or 10 o'clock the next morning. And then the aftershocks after that, they came, a little bit less frequently. Saturday continued with mostly everyone staying in. The bridge that takes us to the highway from our house was damaged, so traffic had to be rerouted. And one of the bridges on the highway, the one and only way in and out of Anchorage, which is a main city in Alaska, yeah, it had damage as well, and traffic had to be rerouted while repairs were being done on that. But right now, most everything has been shut down, but a few places are open so people could get supplies and food and stuff like that. But the city of Anchorage really came together to help out the people. Roads have been fixed, power has been restored, water mains that have busted are being repaired. So far, from everything I've seen and heard, it doesn't look like there was a single fatality. And you know what else we didn't have? We didn't have looting. We didn't have rioting. People here experienced a national, a natural disaster, and instead of trying to take advantage of the situation, they helped out their fellow man to get through a rough time. And the rough times aren't over yet. School's been canceled for the next week while repairs are being made. Hardly any stores have opened back up yet, but we're getting through this, and we're getting through it together. The rest of the world should look to the people of South Central Alaska as an example of how you should react to a disaster. But that's going to do it for this video. I hope to not make more videos like this in the future. I should be getting back into making WoW videos very soon. I've been working on a video on how Blizzard can learn from classic WoW to make retail better, and I'm hoping to get that video out in the next week or two. But if you made it to the end of this video right now, I just want to say thank you very much, and I'll see you next time.